Hey everyone, my name is Adam Gardner. I'm the APAC or lead developer advocate for Asia Pacific, China, Japan, that area of the world. Thank you for spending some time with me, and we're going to talk about destroyable demos at Dynatrace, and it will be a hands-on. So hopefully you checked the prereqs. As long as you've got a GitHub account, you can follow along. Otherwise, of course, you can just watch and listen and rewatch the recording afterwards. So, quick agenda, of course. Who am I? I'll then give you the 10,000-foot view of what we'll kind of do it backwards. So I'm going to show you what you would see if you were a customer, prospect, or one of our internal folk doing one of these demos. And then we'll take a step back. You'll actually spin your own up. So I want to get you hands-on as quickly as possible. And then we'll go all the way back to the beginning, and I'll tell you the history of what we built, how we built it, and why. So we'll kind of get your hands on, and then I'll come back to the why in the slides. Then we'll jump back into the hands-on, and you'll actually build out your own demo, and you'll leave that section with a template that lets you basically recreate all of this afterwards. Then, just as important as all of the code and all the hands-on, the documentation for this, because these are end-to-end tutorials. So, users aren't going to be able to use this unless they have full documentation. And I'll get into it a little bit later, but I don't think a README is documentation. Obviously, being Dynatrace, I'll talk about the observability angle of this system, and then the testing and the end-to-end testing and the nightly testing that we do to make sure that things don't break. And then, obviously, I'll wrap up. I'll talk about some of the lessons I've learned through the time building out this system. Now, a bit of housekeeping. I think we'll just drop all of the questions, any issues you have in the Zoom chat, and then I'll just keep an eye on that down in the corner there. So if you're stuck, please just sing out on the Zoom chat, and I'll try and help you along. Okay, as I say, I'm Adam Gardner. I'm the lead developer advocate for this region, the Asia Pacific region. Obviously, I'm an observability guy and have been for a decade or so, probably more now. I am a CNCF ambassador, so the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. I'm an ambassador for them. Obviously, this is the day job, an international speaker, so I go to conferences and meetups and talk about cool cloud native stuff and Dynatrace. And obviously, and I have a life. And in my spare time, I'm a scuba diver. So if you're ever in Australia, or if I'm ever in your region, please hit me up and we'll go for a dive. Okie dokie. Yes, the hands-on almost before any slides. I know we just had some, but let's get to it. So go into a browser and open these two tabs side by side, github.com/codespaces and then codespaces.new, and just leave those two tabs open. Codespaces.new. Okay. And I appreciate this will be a bit random for now, but I promise this will all make sense. As I say, we'll kind of start halfway down and then we'll come back to this. So github.com/codespaces is your place to make sure that you're not getting charged any more money. That's a very important tab. Leave it open, because if you panic, if you ever wonder, you can just go back there and things will appear in this list down here and you can just delete them and be sure that you're not getting charged any money. On that, though, you shouldn't be getting charged any money, because what we do today will come out of your free tier on GitHub. They give quite a generous free tier, so I really wouldn't expect anything, any charges to be levied. Codespaces.new links you to this, and basically this is your way to spin up Codespaces. There are other ways, but this is kind of the cheap, the quick way. So leave these two open for now. And then I would like you to go to this URL. I'll drop this in the chat because it's a bit long to type out. So what you're looking at if you're at this URL is what either an internal staff member would see if they were to follow one of these tutorials that we make, or a customer or a prospect, and basically any one of those people would come to us and say, look, we need to learn, in this case, we're sending logs through OpenTelemetry, and we want to learn how to clean up our logs. We're sending too much data to Dynatrace. We want to redact it. We want to drop some data, whatever. Okay, we will then go away and make an end-to-end tutorial, and they get to have a nice full website that walks them through exactly what they're going to do and why. And you can feel free to scroll down at the bottom and just click here to begin. But they would be asked to sign up for a Dynatrace tenant if they don't already have one. Don't do this now. We don't have time. But if you want to come back and do this later, of course you can. But they will be asked for some prerequisite data. They'll be asked to create an API token, whatever we need them to do up front. Then at some point, they will get all of our tutorials have this button, open in GitHub Codespaces. And if they click that button, they get to a page that might look familiar to you. It's the codespaces.new. But what it's done is it's pre-populated things. Now, don't click create code space. We don't need to. I'm going to bring you back into a different code space. I just want to show you the sort of what a user would see. So they would be asked to, you'll probably be seeing some boxes here. I've run this before, so GitHub already knows my details, but there's a form down here. You fill out your details and you hit create code space. Okay, and then you carry on with the tutorial and everything's good. You do your scenarios, whatever you want to do, and then you are done. You've learned what we need you to learn. So we take you to the first link, github.com/codespaces, and you delete the code space. Simple. So that's the 10,000 foot view of what someone would see when they attempt one of these tutorials. Now, I'd like you to go to this URL, and you're actually going to spin your own up. So again, I'll put this in the chat. And you'll notice that's the codespaces.new website, but just the URL parameters have it pre-selected for my repo. You can also just, select it from the drop down there, but you'll notice it's picked up some details. We're on the main branch. We've got a configuration called lab 1. Your region might be different. Mine has pre-selected to Australia, and it's pre-selected a machine type. So what compute resources do we need behind the scenes to make this happen? So if you're on this page, go ahead and enter your name. So I'm going to put Adam Gardner, and your favorite color. I'm going to put, I don't know, red. And then hit create code space. And wait, and wait, and wait. So what this is doing behind the scenes, it has picked up that repository, agardnerit/PlatformCon 2025. It is reading the repository and it's spinning up some infrastructure that GitHub host behind the scenes, and it's going to drop us into that environment. Now, while we wait for this to spin up, there is an option to pre-build these environments. So this spin up phase is a lot quicker. But then there are certain trade-offs where certain things have to be static. So in this case, because we're all doing it and we're all providing different information, we'll do this live. In fact, we'll jump into the slides and we'll wait until that spins up. Let's jump ahead to save some time. So what we've got is a system. Let me jump to the why and what we built all of this. We have a number of teams in Dynatrace. The team I'm part of, the developer advocacy and education team. We've got the post-sales support teams. They are the people who, once you've bought the product, they're basically who come on site and help you use the thing. And then there's the support and the live chat. So if you're on Dynatrace and you need some support, you can open a chat window and you get through. They're global, but in this region, they're mainly in Sydney. So you can chat to a human and get some support. And of course, on the pre-sale side, we've got sales engineering who, are more on the pre-sales, proving that the product can do something. But all of those people are trying to solve the same problem. They're trying to enable customers or prospects on some aspect of our product, or the cloud native landscape. And how do we actually get that to them with their data, with YAML files, with hands-on, not just, yes, tick, it can do it, but how do we actually do this with our own material? There's something in the chat here. Yeah, human in chat, pretty rare nowadays. Yeah, absolutely. So yes, because what we commonly hear is, well, that's great. We've had the demo. We understand it can be done, but how do I do it with my data, with my stuff? And so this was the problem we're trying to solve. We're also trying to figure out how, as the developer advocacy team, can we, whatever we create, can we democratize that and spread it across Dynatrace internally? Because there's 4 of us globally. We can't build every single demo for every single technology. We have to be the experts and then spread that knowledge. Just like platform engineering, you're giving your best practices, but then you can't do everything all at once. So how do we democratize that and spread that knowledge across Dynatrace, but also maintain some standards? Because we can't have everybody doing everything, doing it their own way. We need some guardrails or some guided paths there. And then, as I say, how do we actually bundle this up in some way, shape, or form and offer this to our, internal folk as a platform and as a product? And that bit is key. It really is a product that we've built here. It's an internal product. We're never going to sell this to customers, but it is very much a product, and a product mindset that I and we in the developer advocacy team have to take. So hopefully I've waffled enough that we are up and running. Okay, perfect. So if you're seeing a screen like this, if you jump back to your browser, you will be able to curl localhost and see some data. Or, of course, you can go to the ports tab and then hover over this random looking URL and then click the little globe icon. And we cross our fingers and hope that the demo gods are working for us. And there we go. PlatformCon 2025. Welcome, Adam Gardner in red, to PlatformCon 2025. Enjoy the session and some useful links. So that is your first demo environment, believe it or not. So we're going to come back a little bit later to explain this. But this tab here really is a full working, there is a compute behind this. This isn't mocked up. This is live, a live environment that you can play with. Okay, back to the slides. So, I mean, if we're to build something to enable our customers to leverage this capability, Dynatrace plus a cloud native product, or plus Grafana, or plus K6, plus JMeter, what are the options that we have as a developer advocacy team, or really as a business, to actually do that? Well, the first one is we basically do nothing. We just stay with the status quo. You book some training with us. We turn up on site or on a Zoom call. We provide all the infrastructure. We provide all the PowerPoints, all the stuff. and then you leave and you leave with nothing. Well, that's what got us here, so I don't think that's really a solution. Next option is obviously static documentation. Videos, blogs, TikToks, websites, YouTube, all the rest of it. Somewhere where you're just watching and maybe copy pasting, maybe transcribing, but it's very, it doesn't feel quite right for us as practitioners. Then we've got a read-only sandpit or a playground environment. And we do actually have that at Dynatrace. Basically, you can, from your tenant, if you're wondering, well, can Dynatrace do AWS with S3 monitoring, for example, you can jump into the playground, and that is a real environment filled with real live data that runs 24/7. But again, that's answering a different question. It's a very valid question, but it's a different one. That is more, is it a tick in the box? Can it actually do that thing? So very valid, not our solution. The next one is where I see most companies or teams, even when they're trying to share knowledge around teams, this is where they stop. They just provide a Git repo and they say, well, run these commands, pip install, or provide some make files or some shell scripts. And that's kind of it, you know? And the problem we found with that at Dynatrace was our customers often can't. They're not admin on the box. They can't spin up. They can't install stuff. And we were a bit worried that it's impossible to prove a negative. So you can't prove how many people have not done the thing you want them to do because they couldn't. So they might just look at that Git repo and go, I can't install that tool. I'm just going to go elsewhere. So that's a big worry for us, and it's not very user friendly to have to set up an environment just to run a tutorial. Then, of course, we could provide the on-demand cloud infrastructure. We could create the VMs. We could charge that back to you in some way. But to be honest, the DevRel team, we don't have the expertise to spin up a payment gateway and take your credit card details and make sure they're secure. And that's just not a problem that we wanted to solve. We didn't, and ideally, we didn't want to charge you anything for doing this. So out of all of this enablement, we need to enable customers. We have some requirements. We need a wide range of configurations supported. If I want to write my tutorial in Python and Sarah wants to write it in Golang or Shell, that should be fine. It's got to be accessible to all. So whether they're an internal person or whether they're a customer, it doesn't really matter, because the post-sales people can assume that you're already a customer. They can assume that you already have paid for the product, that you already have data. I turn up to places like KubeCon and you might never have heard of Dynatrace. You don't have a tenant, you don't have any capability. So my problem is that I need to provide everything. It needs to be very easy for you to do right there and then. It's got to be low friction and low cost. If I turn around to you and say we can do this, but it's going to cost $300, you're just going to walk away. You're not going to do it because you're going to have to ask for, budget from your boss, and that's never going to get approved. So we've lost you there as well. And that happens internally as well. We can't get budget across the teams internally, so it doesn't happen. Following industry norms was a big thing, and I'll keep coming back to this because we do not want to reinvent the wheel as a team. There's only 4 of us globally. If there is a standard industry recognized tool, preferably open source, of course, that does the job, does it well, we are going to leverage that. If there is a specification that we can draw upon and use, we're going to use that. We don't want to reinvent the wheel here. So that's a key indication, and that goes with the minimal vendor lock-in. Of course, we don't want to say you must be using cloud provider X in order to follow our demos, because then if you're not using cloud provider X, tough. That's no good. We need it as generic as possible. It must be fully documented. Excuse me. And this is a hill that I will die on. because a README is not documentation. A README is at best a pointer to your documentation. And you saw that before. You get a full website, and we'll actually walk through, and you'll build your own website by the end of this session. It must be, as Dynatrace, it must be fully observable and tested. So our solution you've used them already. They're development containers. That's exactly what you spun up before, was a development container backed by an infrastructure provider. Development containers allow you to use a container as a fully featured environment. That was the hook for us. So think about that sentence. What that's saying is, if you have a development container, you can spin up a world that you can drop users into. And the next thing that really caught our eye was that development containers can be run locally or remotely in a private or public cloud. So again, that choice of where you decide to run it. You want to run it on your laptop? Go right ahead. You want to run it in cloud provider A? Go for it. You've got your own VM you want to attach this to? That's perfectly fine as well. So we've got the flexibility, and dev containers are an open specification. So tick, we don't need to reinvent that either. Now, I do need to have a call out to Sasha, who actually made me aware and taught me about development containers, because I don't think we'd be here without Sasha's knowledge. So thank you very much to Sasha for that one. So this is a dev container. This is exactly what you were dropped into before. It's a way that you, as I say, can define and configure a world that you drop the user into. Here, you give it a name, you give it a pre-built image or a Docker file, and we'll see that in a moment. And then you describe some resources that the underlying infrastructure provider should respect. You're basically saying here, look, to run this, I need 2 CPUs and 4 gigs of RAM, or whatever it is you need. And then there are some life cycle hooks, like the post create command. And there, it's not just what's in the Docker file, but we can actually do some post logic and start running scripts and installing things or doing whatever you need to do. Now, of course, all of that is to say that's great, but it's a dev container is just a specification. It's just this is what the world should look like. We still needed to pick an infrastructure provider. Again, we want the user to choose, but we as a platform team, providing this as a product, as a platform, we want to provide a recommended golden path. Now, containers.dev have a list of supporting services, obviously localhost. You've got GitHub, Code Sandbox, DevPod, Gitpod. We evaluated all of them. We picked GitHub for 3 reasons. 1, the familiarity and the usage, of course. 2, they have a free tier, which you're leveraging right now. And 3, the easy integration with GitHub and their other services like GitHub Pages. That's taking nothing away from the other providers, but that's just our choice of what we decided to go for. So enough slides. Let's get to building. Let's jump into the first example. So if you go back here and type git remote-v, you should see the origin, and then you can follow that to my GitHub account, and you should get to the repo that is behind this this dummy website that we set up initially. If someone could just put a thumbs up in the chat to say we're still following or haven't lost anybody. Okay, I'm going to assume we're good. So as I say, what you're looking at is the dev container. Every repo with a dev container in starts in, and I would recommend that if you get handed a repo, start in the .dev container folder. and have a look at the dev container.json. And this is going to look very familiar because this is the dev container specification. We've got a name, which is lab1. We've got a build. In this case, we're saying don't build a pre-built image. Leverage a Docker file. That is, as you can see, it's in here. We'll have a look at that in a moment. We are telling the infrastructure provider, in our case GitHub, that we need 2 CPUs. We are going to, when this world spins up, we should forward or open up port 80. And in GitHub's case, that create some magic behind the scenes to create an ingress and create that magic URL that you saw. And we're going to label port 80 as the web server port. And then after that container, the Docker file is built and we've attached the user to it, we run this post create command. And basically I decided to write mine in Python. You can write yours in whatever you like. This environment installer.py, which we'll get to in a moment. And then the secrets are what you filled in at the beginning, the form that you saw, where it asks you for a name and a color. Now, what happens there is GitHub picks that up, encrypts those values, stores it in GitHub secret, and then makes it available to your container or your world as an environment variable. So if I do print env name, we see Adam Gardner. So it's a really nice way that they provide just to ask for user input and then provide it as an environment variable. Something in the chat here. Connection issues, but I'm following. Okay, cool. So then what do we do? How do we follow this? Well, we've got here, and let's first have a look at the Docker file. There is absolutely nothing scary in here. We're building from Ubuntu. We are installing Apache 2 and some utilities, and then we are copying index.html to the root of Apache and then running bin bash. Now, the index.html is a static file with name placeholder and color placeholder. So the question is, how did we get this? Well, the answer is the post create hook. So we spin up the Docker container, we attach, and then based on this command, we run the post create command, which is our Python script. So now let's have a look at that. First thing we do in Python is we grab those environment variables, remember, that are already set by GitHub. And this one, by the way, if you don't set a color, I'm going to default you to blue. That's just a fallback. And then we read the static HTML and replace the placeholders and put the file back and write it back to the original thing and then start the web server. Simple. And that's what gives you this. If I could make my slides work, that would be good. So now that you've got a feel for the demo, head on across to that URL. I've just shortened it. It is still a GitHub URL. I'll put it in the chat again. And what this is a template that will, let me drop this in the chat. So this time it's a little bit more complicated, but the bones are the same. But what I would like you to do is go up here and say, use this template. And this is where the platform engineering, this is where our product, this is what we offer to our teams. So we say, look, if you want to build a demo, we're not going to build it for you, but we've got a guardrail here. So we ask them to go here, create a new repository from this template. And then, of course, they PlatformCon demo, create repository, and it picks all of that config up and dumps it into my GitHub account. And then obviously I'm free to work on my own copy. So go ahead and once that's sort of cloned into your account, click the code, the green code button, and toggle across the code spaces here. And then, as tempting as it is, please don't click create code spaces on main. The reason is this doesn't prompt you for any input variables. So make sure that you click new with options, and it will take you back to that form that we know and love. Now, again, I've run this before. You will be getting a form value for this demo. Just feel free to add anything you like. What we actually do with this is we build up Dynatrace URLs and API tokens and things. But for now, you can just put in whatever you like here. So I'm going to write dummy in here. And you'll notice that across my account, GitHub has already encrypted this, and there is a key called DT environment ID in the encrypted vault, and it's saying, look, I've already found one. Do you want me to associate this with a repository? So as users rerun your scenarios, it's nice and easy. They can just click, yeah, I've done this before. I know what this is. Yeah, create code space again. And as always, we'll wait and let that build. While you're doing that, you can flick back to github.com/codespaces and refresh the page, and you'll notice that you've got two items in this list. So PlatformCon demo, which I think is this one here, the new one. That's what I called it. And then PlatformCon 2025. That is the first code space. So we're done with that now. So if you want to, you can go ahead and just click the little three dots and say delete. Just to, again, minimize your, or let's say maximize your free tier usage on what you get out of GitHub. So let's just jump back to the slides while that's building once again. I'm going to take a pause for questions. Let's have a look. Are there any questions in the chat? Nope. Okay. It's amazing how slow this feels when you're doing a live demo. Doesn't feel very slow when you're doing it offline and just sitting around waiting for things, but when you're doing a live demo and you're waiting for something to cross a screen and build. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead to the documentation. So, again, we'll jump back into the code and how you build these environments, and this one will be a Kubernetes cluster. But I want to step forward to talk about once you've got your demo platform running, whatever that may be, documentation is key. If people can't use whatever you build, then it's useless. I mean, you may as well not have built it. So in each repo, you will notice, where are we? Ah, there we go. Good. You'll notice a docs folder. And that is a full documentation stack that we can actually build and deploy on GitHub. So again, as a platform team, we can say to our internal customers, look, this repo, this template repo is absolutely everything you need. It's all of the code base, but it's also a full documentation stack that you can go ahead and write your documentation and publish it to GitHub. Okay, I think I've talked long enough. We should be good. Oh, no, we're still running. Too quick. There, so now you can see that run post create command. So we're dropped into the world and everything's looking colorful, the green finishing up tick, and now we're running the environment installer. So while that's running, I'll show you what's actually happening. We install a tool called RunMe, which I'll get to later on. We build up some Dynatrace environment URLs again. Yours might be dummies, but we use those to pre-configure and connect to Dynatrace, the Dynatrace tenant. We then go ahead. This is the main thing for today. We create a Kubernetes cluster. So what you're actually looking at now, once this finishes, is you're in a Docker container, and then there is a Kubernetes kind cluster inside that Docker container. And so now the world is your oyster when it comes to cloud native, because you've got a fully functioning cluster in that container. And we just need to be patient. No, patience is not my virtue. Meanwhile, yes, good point. Any questions? About 70% progress. Good. It's not just me. I thought it feels particularly slow today. And this is one of the downsides on relying on other people for infrastructure. There we go. Done. Okay. All right. Let's try again. kubectl. Yeah. Nodes. Yep, there we go. We've got a kube cluster with absolutely nothing deployed. No namespaces, no pods. So again, we say to our internal customers, we're going to provide you with a blank cluster that you can then go and install whatever you need into that cluster, and away we go and build the environment. It is worth saying, by the way, everything you're looking at, all of this is completely open source. All of these repos are public, so don't worry about like copy and pasting stuff. But this is all you can take this and be quote unquote be inspired by any of this. So let's get into documentation. We decided to go with mkdocs, and particularly we used mkdocs material because it's markdown based. And again, we wanted people to be able to write documentation in as simple as possible. We didn't want them to have to use HTML or even know HTML. The mkdocs is a framework that's obviously widely used. It's well documented. There's lots of examples out there on the net, so we don't reinvent the wheel in that either. It's, as I've alluded to before, it's completely self-contained in the docs folder of each repo, and we're going to get into that now. And then what we actually do for each repo is we build and host that on GitHub pages. So if you run mkdocs serve, that is your local, that's going to spin up your documentation locally for development. And then all you need to do to have GitHub deployed is say mkdocs gh-deploy. And as long as you've got your GitHub API token set, that is just going to go and create a GitHub pages, which is what you were seeing at the very beginning. So let me bring it back up. Slightly different repo, but this one's about how you detect problems in logs, but the point is the same. So all I did to do this was say mkdocs gh-deploy in this repo, and boom, I get a full nice website, even with nice toggles for my color scheme. I don't know why I bother. I stay in dark mode all of the time. Okay, let's build some docs. So have a look at the docs folder, and you'll notice, again, as a platform team, we need to provide best practices, but also flexibility. So we say, well, our standard is that every repo comes with an index.md, the home page. It comes with a getting started, a cleanup, a resources, and a what's next. And we build that up into a skeleton menu structure that says, the about page, the first page is the index, getting started, and then That's up to you, internal team. When you build out your tutorial, you can have as many steps as you like here, but you must have these steps because we can't have every tutorial with different pages, everything, all over the place. We need that standard, but we also need to give people the flexibility to do their own thing. Now, you'll notice there are some weird syntax in here, and this is markdown syntax, but it's basically a snippet. So what this is doing, if we look at snippet/disclaimer.md, and again, these are standards that we say every tutorial must start with an index page, and it must start with a disclaimer. And what you're seeing is this big orange box here, the support policy, that says, look, this is built by someone in Dynatrace, but it's not officially supported. You can't raise a support ticket against this. Please reach out to Adam or raise a GitHub issue or whatever the team that's creating this, whatever their support policy is. But we can't have this being mistaken for real product that people pay for and people expect support, because it's not. It's open source. It's free. Oh, and I've been disconnected. Hopefully, I haven't been disconnected from. Can someone just drop in the chat? I hope I haven't been disconnected from Zoom. I don't think I have. Uh, you're still online. Okay, perfect. Rabel, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but yes, you're absolutely right. If you run kubectl get pods, there are no pods. This is a completely blank cluster. So that's to be expected. There are no resources in those namespaces. There are no namespaces. That's the point. We're giving the internal staff a completely blank slate, to then they have to go and embellish that and build whatever world that they want, whatever they want installed on that cluster. So that there shouldn't be anything on that cluster. Actually, to that point, that's a very good point that I nearly forgot. If you go to, I think I've got the short link in the docs. Yes, I'll drop this in the chat. Again, just a GitHub repo, but I've shortened it for ease. This is a full platform engineering demo based on code spaces. Again, it's open source, but we use this for internal enablement. So when our staff come to us and say, look, I've heard of this thing called Argo. What is it? I've heard of this thing called Backstage. What is that? I've heard of open feature. What are feature flags? This is a full platform. It's Argo, Backstage, feature flagging, security tools, open telemetry, and it all spins up in the browser. So this is a full hands-on platform engineering, and again, open source. So feel free to bookmark that repo. But yeah, Backstage, Argo workflows, open telemetry, Captain, some security tooling, and Dynatrace, of course, for your observability. And it basically spins up, and then you can take on two roles when you follow this. You're the platform owner, or you're the application team that this platform is targeting. So when you log in, if you launch this and you log in, when you go into Backstage, you can onboard a new application, and it will actually pick up, it's all as code, so it's using Argo App of Apps, and it picks up the application from here, and this app template, it templates it out with your new application. So that is a full platform that you can leverage. So feel free to play around with that. I'm glad you mentioned that there was nothing there, because I didn't want to show you that there really is a full demo behind this. Okay, sorry, got a little bit sidetracked, back to our documentation story. So back into here, if you type pip, in fact, I'm going to copy and paste because I'm notoriously bad at that. I'll drop this into the chat. So by default, we don't install the documentation packages because, of course, that's bloat. And most people, unless you're actually authoring these demo scenarios, unless you're like writing the scenario itself, as an end user, you never need the MKDocs stack. You're not going to be writing the website, but we are going to now. So let's do that. Right click that, paste in there. And this will go and install all of the documentation stack. That's basically just MKDocs. Now I can do mkdocs serve -a localhost 8000. Now the -a localhost 8000 is optional. I'm just putting that there so that you know where that port came from when it opens port 8000. And what that's going to do is look at our mkdocs.yaml file that we saw earlier and use that to spin up our documentation stack. And it says serving on localhost 8000. Perfect. Now go across to the ports tab and you'll notice a new port that has been opened, and GitHub has very nicely opened a new URL for us on port 8000. So if you hover over that and click the little globe, there we go. We've now got our placeholder documentation stack. So let's start making some changes to this. Into our docs folder, if we have a look, find the index.md file and just start changing stuff, play around with it, whatever you want. This is my first ever website. And it should just auto refresh. So in this way, you can start really quickly prototyping your documentation, make sure everything's fine and you're happy with it. And then when you're happy with it, you can build it. We're not going to do this because obviously I don't want to build and push websites to your GitHub account. But trust me, it's one command to then bundle this up and have GitHub deploy it. And I will show you the command if you really do want to play with it. It's just mkdocs gh-deploy. And that's how we get the code and the docs co-located in one so that they live in one. And you'll see a little bit later why it's so important that they are together. Okie dokie. Little break for questions as always. Anything anyone stuck on? Okay, let's proceed. All good. Okay, let's talk about observability. So, having these demos is no good unless we know from a platform team who basically sit across the top of this and make sure all of this is still working. It's no good unless we know it is working. So that's where observability comes in. Now, when the environment is first creating, when we're attaching you into this world, there is a log file called the creation log that is created. So if you drop into your code space and go to the three little lines up the top here and go to view and then command palette and just start typing creation log, it should say view creation log. So if, when we were waiting forever for it to kind of get its boots on and kick itself into gear. If anything goes wrong, you can see exactly what happened when, and in this case, it was building the Docker file. So there we go, reading the database and installing apt and et cetera, all the way down at the bottom. If everything's fine, this is what you're looking for. Finish configuring code space, dev container exited with 0. And here you can see we're even waiting for the control plane. This is when we were installing the cluster, the Kubernetes cluster, remember, or just waiting for the control plane node to start. So if you ever are building these and you get stuck, this is my first port of call. This log file is what I would put on. What I would actually do in reality is I would configure your, this is kind of my best practice. I would configure your code space to first deploy an OpenTelemetry collector, and then have that collector watch for the log files that are created on this in this code space. And then the OpenTelemetry collector forwards those log lines to your observability backend. And in that way, if the code space dies, you can see in your observability backend these log files. And of course, then they are centralized as well. Now, this log file, what we found was it's not very user-friendly. I mean, it doesn't look very good, to be honest. There's some timestamps and but it's hard to understand the timing, because the other thing we wanted to check is that if this takes 30 seconds to spin up a code space today, and then tomorrow it takes 5 minutes, well, that's user experience. As we saw before, it's painful waiting for that to happen. So we leverage a tool called Trace Pusher that transforms log files into distributed traces. Let me find the right link. Where'd it go? There we go. Open image, zoom in. So on the left there, we're basically picking up that log file and we are transforming it via this Trace Pusher tool to a distributed trace. So if you don't know what a distributed trace is, look at it as this entire thing, top to bottom, was the amount of time that it took to create the code space. So left to right is your time. It's like a Gantt chart. Now, each of these rows, apologies for the terrible resolution on this photo, but each of these rows is a log entry. And you'll notice there, you can just about see it, 3.4 seconds. So it's a much longer bar than this one at whatever that is, 200 milliseconds. Traces are a very easy way. It's the same information, it's just the way it's visualized. In this case, at least, in a distributed system, these bars actually trace across microservices. But in this case, it's just a visual representation of how long each step took, so that we can confidently say, yeah, that one should take 5 seconds or 5 minutes. So that's a nice little way to consume the information in a different way if you need to. And as I say, I would be deploying a collector into here and then sending the logs to Dynatrace. Now, assuming everything starts up, so the code space has started correctly. Oops. You'll notice in the environment installer.py, there's some code. I don't know if you can read Python, but if you can't, the main bit I want to focus on is that else statement. And it says send startup ping, and we give it a demo name. So in this case, imagine we have got a NetFlow demo of how to work with NetFlow and ingest NetFlow into Dynatrace. We send a business event to Dynatrace, and then we can chart which code spaces are actually being used in aggregate. So we're not interested in your user data. We're not interested in who you are, but we as a platform team, we have lots of these demos, and we need to know which ones we should maintain and which ones we should deprecate. Where do we put our efforts? Now, the reason we use business events are a Dynatrace construct. And when you send an event in, that is a business event, it is never aggregated, it's never dropped, it's never sampled. It maintains its integrity for as long as you want to store it. Anything up to 10 years, you can store these events. So that means we can really confidently, even to an audit level perspective, say, yes, this demo was spun up on this day, going back 10 years. But again, we're not really getting down to the level of who's spinning things up. We just need to know this is the most popular demo. And of course, then we can start, charting things and making nice charts and reporting to the bosses that work is being done. Now, talking about the documentation. So remember, we've got the code space, hands-on, techie code. We've got the documentation website that's hosted on GitHub Pages. We also want to check that is being used, and we want to check the difference between the documentation use and the code space use. If the documentation is getting used, but no one is spinning up the code spaces, that's a good argument to no longer maintain the code space and just, blog stuff, because users are still getting value. So the way we do that is we create an agentless real user monitoring. We give it a name, and Dynatrace gives us a JavaScript snippet. We then take you can have a look at this as well, in docs overrides main.html, there's a little placeholder there from the template. You put your JavaScript in there, and basically what that does, when you build and deploy the website, every page then has the JavaScript snippet in the header block. Then what we do is, using those snippets that I showed before, we include a little snippet of JavaScript on each page. So we have a little snippet per page, and we say when the DOM content is loaded, i.e. when the page loads, fire a business event to say we've loaded the current page. And you can see it there in index.md. That's the snippet that you're seeing there. Again, it's only an event that says a home page load has occurred. There's no identifying information. We're not interested in that. Why would we be? But we just want to check that the docs are being used. And then, of course, we can see stuff like this. So this chart tells me, by fetching the biz events and splitting and filtering by the demo net flow and then summarizing by the count, I can see lots of people are hitting the home page. Lots of people are viewing the data page. Not a lot of them are starting the demo. Why? I might be able to guess that the sales engineers are using the view demo page because it's got screenshots on, and they want to just prove to someone that we can do NetFlow. We'd need to look into that a bit more, but that's the sort of level of detail we can get to. Just pause to see if there's any nothing in the chat. Just a reminder, if you do have any questions, sing out in the chat, and I'll see them. Okay, the next documentation piece is user feedback, because it's not just that people are using this and hitting the website, but it's actually how they feel. And that's a really important metric. I know it's a bit wishy-washy, but it's really important to see. So this is something new that we're rolling out. It is only available on the NetFlow demo at the moment. But at the bottom of the NetFlow page, if I just jump into that demo, see down here on the bottom right, there's a little feedback button. And when I pop that open, I can say, yep, I'm happy. And I can put some text in here. And if I click submit, that again will send a business event to Dynatrace. And of course, if you're not using Dynatrace, you can send, these are just JSON payloads, so you can send that wherever you like. You could send a log line. Really, for this hands-on, the point is that you need this data no matter where it goes. So yep, that sends into Dynatrace, and again we can chart things. Keeps jumping all over the place. Hang on. No, try again. Yep, so we can grab and split by the name of the tutorial, the rating. We can split by the smiley face count, which the bosses always like. More smiley faces is a good thing. But really, what we're looking at here is the actual textual feedback, because that gives you real actionable insight on how you make things better from both the tutorial owner. Remember, we don't write all of these tutorials, but also from our perspective. If they're saying, well, I can't even follow this tutorial or it doesn't make sense, we can then reach back out to that team internally and say, look, you might want to rewrite this doc page because apparently, no one can use the thing or understand it. So let's just show you that in the code. So if you've probably already done this as I've been talking, but if you go into docs and then snippets, you'll see there, biz event dash homepage. There's the DOM content loaded for the homepage. Same for the resources page, and so on and so forth. There's our disclaimer for the sample, for the support policy, sorry, and that's just included like this. One other thing I forgot to mention is there's another little syntax you can use, which is we commonly get asked, look, Adam, I've got a shell script that I provide to customers that does this. Way back at the beginning, I was saying that's where most companies stop. We needed a way to say to those internal users, look, bring your shell script. We can use it and we can really easily leverage what you've already built. You don't need to rebuild everything. So what you're looking at here is in the documentation stack, we are going to include just a section of a shell script. So imagine this end-to-end sample is the whole thing, creating a cluster, deploying the workloads, testing stuff. But all we want is one tiny little snippet in the documentation stack. So if I show you the end-to-end sample, you'll get an idea that all they need to do, all our team, in the internal team needs to do is annotate their shell script with these comments that say start and end, and then whatever name they want to give it. And in the doc stack, that's precisely what happens. It only includes that little bit of the shell script. So it's a really simple way for someone just to email you a shell script, and within a day, you can have a full documentation website up and running for them. Okay, before we get into testing, are there any questions? Yes, there are. Great session. Oh, thank you. So very informative. Thank you very much. Yeah, let me know if I'm going too fast or too slow, by the way. Just sing out in the comments and I'll speed up or slow down. But testing. So we've covered the code. We've covered the documentation on how end users use the code. But from our team's perspective, from the central platform team that has to stand by and ultimately say to the CTO, look, these are getting used. Yes, we can do that with the observability, but the product is also changing. So how do we make sure these demos don't go stale? Because that's a problem we had in the past, is that someone would write a tutorial and then, oh, don't you know they've left, or it's 2 years later and the product's moved on and that tutorial is completely and hopelessly out of date. So that was a problem that we identified up front. We really, really needed to solve that kind of first before we built any of this stuff. So let me show you how we achieved that. Again, you can follow these slides or you can jump into your copy of the environment installer, but you'll notice this if codespace name starts with DT test dash. Now, up to now, if I show you my codespace, you'll notice that you get these random looking names, urban space barnacle, whatever, or what was the other one? Verbose Fortnite. Basically, that's just GitHub making something up to be unique to you. But there is a way that you can hard code that when the code space spins up, you can say, don't give me a random name, call it DT test dash. So that's what you're seeing here. And I'll show you how we stipulate that in a moment. But imagine a code space spins up. Let's see if that jumps to the right slide now. Yay. Okay. So imagine we spun up a code space with DT test dash. Show you that in a moment. What we do, we know it's a test because we have set that. So we set some stuff up and then we trigger the test harness. And again, I'll show you that in a moment. Let's have some more water, sorry. And then once the test harness is finished, we delete the code space with the CLI command that you can see there. GitHub code space delete code space. Code space name is an environment variable that again GitHub handily sets for us with that that random name, so we can leverage that and just force delete the entire code space from the command line. So that test harness.py, again, if our teams want to re-implement not in Python, if they want to do it in Shell, that's up to them. But the golden path here is Python because it's just easier to do, rather than sed, you use replacements and it's just a bit nicer to work in. But that's my preference. You might have a different preference. Regardless, it first reads a file called steps.txt, and you'll notice it's in the main under dev container in the testing repo. Now, you won't have this in yours because we take the base repository and I have added it to my test. And that, honestly, that's only because we don't want you spinning things up in a testing format. But again, this repo is fully public, so you can see what I'm doing here. The Python reads this steps.txt file. We as the authors of the environment write the steps.txt file. Check envars exist, wait for Docker to start, Docker PS, Docker run K6. Now, they might look at first glance like shell commands, but they're not. They're actually pointers to the markdown. That's a really, really key design decision that we made because we didn't want, if you think we've got the raw code, the code space and the code and whatever logic that does, whether it's a cluster or whatever. Then we've got the documentation stack that, yes, sits alongside it, but they could drift. They could get out of date. Someone could update the code and not the docs. This shouldn't, but let's be honest, it happens. We wanted to tie those two things together. So we wanted to say, look, if you mess with one and not the other, your end-to-end test is going to fail. That's by design. It should fail because basically what you're telling the user on the website is not what's actually happening. So that Docker PS on line 3 is actually a pointer to line 20 in the markdown that in this case runs the same command, but there Docker run K6 references this big, block of code. And for that, we use a tool called runme CLI, which is great. I would highly recommend the runme tool. And basically, runme reads the steps, or we read the steps, pass it to runme. Runme then goes and grabs the code snippet that's in the backticks there, and then we can execute that code. So what we've done is we've tightly coupled the test harness to the documentation. And that was a really important decision to make because we need certainty that if we are saying to you, click a button that is called run, and our product teams change that button name to be called go, our test should fail because our website is wrong, and you're gonna look at that screenshot and get confused. So that was a deliberate design decision to really tie those two together. Inside test harness.py, there is a little if statement that says if test underscore in step. So if I look back here, line 6 ends with test Dynatrace UI. This is the next part. So we're running shell commands effectively in the code space, but then we really do want to do a full proper user interface test. And for that, we use Playwright. Again, open source, standard tool, everybody uses it. And where have my graphics gone? There we go. Animations are out of order, but this is our end-to-end Playwright test. So what this will do at the end of steps.txt, it really will launch a headless browser inside the code space, and it will go to Dynatrace and it will log in. It will open the search menu. It will search for a Dynatrace app, in this case, the Notebooks app. It will create a new notebook. And then that last box down, or the second last box down there, it will actually add a metric, in this case, to the Dynatrace notebook, just like a real user would. We're not mocking any of this. We're not assuming, because the first thing we tried was let's just pull the data from the Dynatrace API. Let's just, the code space spins up. Let's just call the API. And if we get data back from the Dynatrace API, that's good enough. And we can assume the user can also see the data in the UI. Yeah, okay. But as we all know, API and UI are different. And again, we wanted these scenarios to be as well tested and thought through and as robust as possible. Now, on the right there, that red arrow is pointing to validate true. And if that is set to true, the end-to-end test will actually really click the run button on the Dynatrace notebook. So it will really run and wait for the data to come back in the notebook. So what you're really looking at here is this is a step-by-step guide of really what the user would do. It's not, we're not just leveraging APIs in any of this stuff. And then at the very bottom there, once we're finally done with the the end-to-end, the headless test, we go and delete the notebook in this case, because we don't want the user's environment, your environment, getting polluted with lots and lots of notebooks that are just for us testing things. Questions. Really smart design. Oh, thank you. What kind of maintenance overhead is associated with demos using this technology? Are you just running your end-to-end test daily and alerting if it fails or doesn't complete, or remediating in this case? Excellent that you should ask that, because the next slide, oh no, not quite the next slide. There we go. So if the output of that last or of any of those steps.txt are not zero, so they're not successful, then we create a GitHub issue. And actually, we've got our team uses Asana, so we've got a separate GitHub workflow just for our team. Not every team has this, but we watch those GitHub issues getting created, and then we create an issue in Asana, because that's what the bosses look at. They don't look at GitHub. And of course, we've got 10, 20, 30 different GitHub repos, so we can't, we need that centralized place. But yeah, if any of these tests fail, then we create a GitHub issue and we just dump all the logs, all the stack trace into the issue. Now, to your point, how do we actually test this? So remember way back at the beginning, I said, well, not at the beginning of the testing, I said we create a machine called DT test dash. Well, this is how we do it. We use Dynatrace workflows engine, and we basically programmatically spin up a code space. So line 11 and 12, we're creating some credentials. And then there we're saying, this is now into GitHub. We're saying, okay, look at the main branch. GitHub, please use a basic Linux 32 GB, which correlate again to that, the dev container, where I was saying I need 2 CPUs and so much RAM. So those little shortcodes, basic Linux 32 GB is a 2-core machine. And then the display name, that's what we're hard coding. So that when that spins up, it's called DT test dash, and that is how the Python triggers. So now you see it end to end. We've got a Dynatrace workflow that runs at 5 a.m. every day. And it just fires and forgets. It fires this off. It doesn't wait for anything. It just says, yes, I spun up the code space. Dynatrace doesn't know anything else apart from the code space started correctly. And then the rest of the workflow happens in the code space. We run through the test harness that I showed you. And if any of that fails, we then create a GitHub issue. And that GitHub issue, in our case, triggers an Asana task. And I wake up and get an alert, and I look into fix it. Did that answer the question, John? Oh, yeah. Okay. So yes, we use the Dynatrace workflow engine. Let's come back there. And that's it. I mean, there's a lot there, but as I say, all of this is open source, completely open source. You feel free to reach out to me as well if you want any pointers. Don't take this for granted. This has been a year's worth of work. Was not a quick thing to set up. So in terms of what lessons we've learned, one, and I know this is ironic considering I've just sat and talked for an hour and a half, but mention the idea, whatever platform you're thinking about, whatever you're thinking about building, and then listen to people. Because I'll be honest, we had this idea about 3 years ago. I had this idea about 3 years ago, and it didn't really get much traction. It only got traction when other people's pain, frankly, got so great that we all started to talk, and actually we were all on site face to face. Again, ironic because I work remotely. But I was showing someone these demo environments and they were saying, how would you build it? So I showed them a very quick version of what we've just gone through. I said, oh, well, we could do that. Yeah, and then he went, oh, let me go and get Sue. And Sue came over and went, yeah, I can do that. And that, when we got enough people together, that's when it really took a step forward. So listen, then talk, and then wait a bit, let it percolate, let people object, and then maybe code, but maybe buy things as well. There's absolutely nothing wrong with buying, because as you've seen, there's a lot of engineering that went into that. And if I could have just bought something off the shelf that did that, that didn't lock me into a vendor and et cetera, I definitely would have done that. So what else? As I say, about 30% of this is actually technical. The rest, it's a cliche. We've all heard it before, but it really is organizational. It's political and it's personal. There are other ways in which people spin up demos still in Dynatrace, but it's their baby, and you can only show them. Trying to force this onto people just doesn't work. They're more likely just to batten down the hatches and say, enough's enough. We're not doing this. So as I say, give people time. They probably don't get it yet. I mean, we've walked through this, and that 90% of that skimmed over you. That's why I'm hammering that all of this is open source, so you can really go and take all of this and really dig in and take what you need from it. They don't get what is in your head as much as you do, because you've been sat thinking about it for the last 6 months, and this is the first time they've heard it. Don't pre-engineer. I could show you GitHub issues where the first time this sort of worked, I was like, oh, couldn't we do this? And we do this, and we add this, and we add this, and we add, and I left the GitHub issues open, and nobody commented. Nobody was interested in the things that I thought were cool. So Cool, good. I didn't do it and I didn't waste my time doing it because it wouldn't have been used anyway. But don't be forced into under engineering. The bosses are going to say do this, but stand firm. Say no. We really do need this end-to-end testing. Yes, it's taking a while. Yes, it's a lot of work, but we really do need this to be future-proof so that your demos that we're putting out to the public aren't broken in 6 months' time. And that's it, really. I mean, all the rest of it is cliched stuff that you probably already know, and it's software development. Now, all of the demos that we have built so far can be found at that link. So if you go to github.com/topics/obslab, they're all tagged with that. If you need any assistance, feel free to reach out to devrel@dynatrace.com. We're a global team. There's 4 of us, as I say, CNCF ambassadors. So we're happy to help and help you get off the ground with this as well. Awesome. In that case, thank you very much for your time.